Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast with your host, Dr. Tony Huang. Today I'm with Heidi. Heidi, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks so much, Tony. This is Heidi Golledge. I'm the CEO and founder of Jobot.
That's really cool. That's a really popular company. What was your journey like at the very beginning when you were starting that company off?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll take it way back. So some of your listeners might not have been born, but in 2000, so it was like the dot-com era, and I had a job in finance, and I felt like there's going to be this time in history that's so unique. And if someday I'm going to be a grandma talking to my grandkids, and they're going to say, Grandma, what did you do? And there was this internet.com and just incredible thing. And I didn't want to stay with what was safe. I wanted to make an impact, make a change. And I started a company back then called Cybercoders. I ended up selling that. Then I had a non-compete. And I really felt that AI was going to take off, but it was also going to be scary for people. They're going to be concerned about AI maybe even taking their job. So I merged the terms job and robot because I thought, we can get more jobs if we, sort of fulfill the promise that would be AI and robots, and that became Jobot.
Wow, that's really exciting. I've heard of cyber coders before. Can you tell the audience what that was and what the journey was for that for you, and then when did you guys exit?
Yeah, that would be great. So I started out with a partner, and then we just completely bootstrapped it. So for years, it's a high tech recruiting firm. So I did a recruitment myself. Like we would do recruitment, for example, software engineers for Expedia, Microsoft. And so we were able to grow cybercoders nationwide. Then I bought out my partner, and took on private equity. So I had Reardon, Lewis, and Hayden. They are a private equity firm in LA. So then we took it an additional 7 years. We grew it from at that point about 50 people to 250 people. And we exited for over 100 million to ASGN, which is a staffing company. So we did,
Wow.
yeah, that was exciting. It was definitely my goal is like before I'm 50 to hopefully grow a company, exit it, retire my mom, who was both a school teacher and also worked at a jewelry store at night. So she worked all the time, and really was a goal to retire her, then retire myself. And I felt like that was the final goal. But with the oncoming excitement of AI, I really felt that I wasn't done. So I came back to the market with Jobot.
Wow, very exciting journey. So you've been in the talent acquisition space for the longest time. Can you tell us what happened way back in the day, like years ago? What were some the common trends that were in that space?
Yeah, definitely. I think that for, way back in the dark ages, they even had a newspaper, which was a printed piece of paper that was thrown at your house by a kid on a bike. And so in the paper, they would have the help wanted ads, and you'd have basically like an inch to sell your job. So you would say, like, we are looking for an engineer. Here's our fax number. So that's like the very dark ages. Then with cybercoders became this ability to have a database of candidates and have key terms, have what is like a semantic search. So it's like, software engineer is also developer, is also programmer, and have that. And so that's how it really became. And then it's now interesting. Like at Jobot, for example, we have 10 million users that come through jobot.com, and we have 15,000 open jobs. So you can imagine it's not even possible for a human to get like file folders and figure out who's a fit for every job. So that's why we definitely use AI now.
Very interesting. So speaking of AI, AI is the hot new thing right now. How has AI changed the interview process or the job search market? What I have to assume it's impacted it substantially. What have you guys seen so far?
Yeah, I think there's many things. I think one of the main things is ability so we have almost 400 recruiters, and they are able to take a job and basically upload it into our software jacks and basically go through where before it was just like a couple key terms. So imagine if you were a junior engineer, you would put every key term possible, and then the database couldn't really be able to tell if you were a senior engineer, if you're a junior engineer. They would just pull up everybody with those keywords. So now using AI, it actually has algorithms that can take into account their education, their experience, a lot of their nuance of their background. And then we can take about 10 million resumes and take it down to about 10. And then we have, again, almost 400 recruiters. And that's where the human component comes in, where they're actually calling people and they're assessing for something that the AI can't do, which is the attitude. So the computer can normally tell the aptitude, can they do it? And then the human can tell the attitude is like, will they do it in a positive way that's good for the culture?
Gotcha. So from what I'm hearing, it's like it streamlines a lot of the recruiters like daily day processes. But like, how does that help out? Like, say, if I needed the job, how does that how does that help me out as like
Yeah,
as someone looking for a job?
it's a good question. So there's many components. Huge is just like a giant time saving engine. So if you were able to use like a chat GPT, you can say like, act as a recruiter and build my resume. And you can actually have, as long as you have, I would say like an ethical background that you say, okay, these are my true background. This is my actual experience. And then you can say, these are the 10 jobs that I want. You can load up those 10 jobs and it can actually customize 10 different resumes, one for each job. So that's extremely powerful. It also allows you to say, like, hey, you know what? Go apply me to these 57 jobs. And it's an interesting thing if you think about it's so important to get that right job because it sets your career and even your life on a certain trajectory. So it's really important to look at so many different avenues and opportunities. And so AI can say like, okay, what's really important to you? You can feed it all of that and it'll serve up the right jobs for you.
So I like that a lot because right now a lot of the folks that are on the job market, they have like one resume, like a template resume that they found online somewhere, and it's just like a boilerplate resume. And when they try to send it off to like uh, to a job submission, like a lot of times they don't get that return call. It's just because it's not like personalized to that specific JD, the job description. So I really like that approach that you guys have, which is like it takes the resume and it makes it more personalized towards that JD, so you have a higher chance of scoring that next interview. That's a really cool like process that I think a lot of like job sites should have, which is like enabling like the job seeker to like get a higher chance of scoring that next interview because like right now I know like the job market is a big concern to like a lot of folks during the last election. Can you tell us like what you've seen right now in terms of like how the job market's like faring in comparison with like previous years?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes is the changes that some of your listeners may have seen in tech. Like never even in my career had I seen large players such as like Google's, Amazon's, the Metas of the world actually laying people off. And so it's an interesting thing is they were doing almost like a hoarding of engineers where let's say they needed 20 engineers for a project, they might hire 100 because they want to make sure the project's getting done, but they also want to stop the growth of startups. So if you take 80 extra engineers and you have this extra money, so in some ways it's actually really healthy for the market that there's more engineers and more startups and more smaller companies, but it is like a more competitive landscape if you are the engineer to figure out what's the real role. I do think that if you are anyone, whether it's an engineer or an accountant, looking for roles where your skill set is continually improving and that you can make an impact. And so it is interesting about how the market has changed to it's still we're still like about 3.9% unemployment. So it's still really good unemployment, but I do find that there are more skilled laborers like engineers, like senior level people who have to make a much bigger effort to get a good job.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I did see, based on conversations with the friends that worked at like the Fangs, that they would hoard all the talent, and that's just to prevent their competition from securing the talent. And I think that was because like also like interest rates were kind of low, so they're able to like grab these loans and then and grab the talent. But as like I think like interest rates right now are really high. It's kind of hard for them to like get loans, and therefore, it's kind of hard to also keep the talent there, especially right now. The big hot thing that everyone's talking about, regardless of what like sector that you're in, is like Gen AI. Like it's
Mhm.
like it's very it has such a grasp on every single industry right now that everyone's like fearful of like job loss. There's reports on the news about like layoffs due to like the increase in funding for Gen AI initiatives. Are you seeing that resonate a lot with like the folks that are applying for roles through your company?
Yeah, I do think that the average person who's applying for jobs is definitely needing to apply for more jobs for the opportunity to get jobs. So it used to be if you were a 3 year software engineer in the Bay Area, like you would get a job immediately. I have heard stories of like people graduating from Stanford or UC Berkeley with computer science and not getting a job. And so that's very rare. We've always seen it for the last 2 decades where they immediately have a job. But I do think that there's so many jobs being created with AI, but I think it's a retooling of even our school system. Like there's a lot that they use AI to sort of block and see if they sort of cheated and used AI to create it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
essentially, soon as they're out of school, they're asked to use AI at their job. Like we use AI, of course, in every facet at Jobot, and from operations to engineering to the recruiters themselves. So I do think that this is going to take a revamp for for our country in terms of education and allowing children to still have critical thought, but become incredible prompt engineers so they can, it's like having them not use a keyboard or not, it's like everybody will be using AI. You won't even say it's powered by AI anymore. It'll be the assumption. It'll be like saying we're powered by electricity.
Yeah, gotcha. What's your like thought on like people that can't get jobs from these like prestigious colleges? Is it because like they can't project themselves correctly, or is it just like they don't have like the soft skills to describe their talent, or do you think it's just like something else?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think part of it is that if you can imagine that they had to do sort of no marketing or advertising for themselves, like imagine all their cohorts for the last 2 decades. Like if you come out with a computer science degree from Stanford, you would assume you have 20 offers. So if you don't, I do feel like that's another revamping that the colleges will have to do, is literally teaching people like, okay, now that you are going to get this degree in the next 6 months, this is what you should do. And so for us, like we would teach people like reach out to people on LinkedIn, like their posts, really figure out where you'd want to work instead of like sitting back and waiting for the offers. So it's kind of like how almost every other field has been. The software engineering is the same now. It's like even for us internally, we look for software engineers that are, positive, excited to build things, that are going to be a good culture fit. They're excited to see like what's this next evolution, use AI themselves. And so it's like having that sort of enthusiasm and excitement to be part of a company and part of a role versus sitting back and just waiting for the offers to come in.
Yeah, I keep telling all these new grads that it's not the classes that you take, it's the hands that you shake. And you should be doing that towards like the end of your degree, right? So like going out there, making like your own website, showcasing all the stuff that you built, like updating your LinkedIn, adding all of like the people that you think that you need to for success, even adding in like hiring managers for like places that you want to apply to. I think that's like what people need to do, and also like getting internships. Like people don't get internships as much as I'd like to see them, and all that stuff adds up, and it just enables you to get like a better positioning when you're trying to get a role. Do you agree with all those?
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. It's an interesting thing about, I've done speeches where I've gone to colleges and I've had, I would say like the B students like surrounding me, coming up, talking to me, asking if they could connect on LinkedIn, asking me questions. And I'd say the A plus students would be in the very back in their laptop, sort of making sure they got their homework done. And it was kind of an interesting thing where it was kind of as if I never came. Like we never met, we never had these moments together. And so it is an interesting thing is you get to like stamp your certificate at the end of 4 years, like you got the A, but it is interesting. College could be much more. And so it is really about these relationships that you build. And it's also like once you get into the company as well. And so it's interesting to think about not only is what is your job and what is your job duties, but who's going to be your leader? Like who's going to mentor you? Who's going to train you? Like it can really be a life-changing experience or it can be just a paycheck.
So I know a lot of folks that, you know, they're way past their like undergrad and they're mature, like they're like early to mid career, and they're wishing to do like a job hop to from like one sector to a different one. So they want to be able to reskill and go into another industry. And a lot of times I see them transitioning from like another industry into like AI, or another industry into data science, or another industry into like computer science. Do you have any like tips and tricks for folks that are wanting to reskill and go into a different sector?
Yeah, I think that a big thing is taking on the burden yourself, because we do have people who contact us and they're like, I hate doing accounting. I really want to do something else. So it comes from a perspective of negative energy. So there's no one that's really like, oh, I'm sorry, Sally, that you hate doing accounting. Let me help you learn AI. But there are components where you could say, like, I really love AI. I'm super excited to learn it. I've gone and was proactive and did these certain classes. I did these certain things. So employers want to sort of embrace this positive energy and that you're bringing something to the table. And you understand that you might have to take like a step back, a step down, either in pay or in title, but you're willing to do it because you're so excited what you can bring to the table. So it is interesting about like how much you can study and think about how can you help this company or this potential employer, this potential manager, versus putting the burden on them to say like, hey, can you get me out of accounting? I hate it.
Gotcha. So in your experience, do you think getting like certifications or like just degrees in general is worth it right now, especially with like all of the emergent technology that's coming out?
It's a good question. I do think that clearly, if you're doing a job that is required, so if you want to be a nurse, obviously you need to be an RN, but I do think there's a lot of certificates that are just money makers. It's like a money grab to it's excuse me, like we don't have companies that say like give us people with these three certifications. They're like give us people with this skill set, this capability, this attitude is a huge thing. Like if you go and get 7 certificates, but you're kind of a jerk, nobody wants to work with you. So I do think like the only time, like if you're getting like an AI cert and stuff, I've never seen any company even ask us for that. But again, if you're, registered nurse, by all means, please get registered.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Like I would rather work with somebody who has like, you know, it's like lower in the skill sets, but they're like really pleasant to work with, rather than like being working with someone who's like the best, but it's just like a complete jerk, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've worked
we
with a lot of people that are just jerks like that. And yeah, I gotta agree, like the interpersonal skills and being able to like communicate and having these soft skills that are really pleasant to work with is probably like something I look forward to the most right now when I'm building a team, rather than like the actual skill set. Because in my opinion, I think you could teach anybody anything. It's just like it depends on like how much of a go-getter they are, like whether or not they're teachable, you know, or like receptive to like feedback. I mean, that's like those are like personal traits I look forward to the most when I'm hiring.
Yeah, they're huge. I mean, it's interesting when earlier in my career, I'd always look for, a certain level of intelligence. And of course you need, a certain level of intelligence to be able to do the job, but the ability to have grit, the humility to take direction, that they're coachable, they're excited, in this certain level of enthusiasm. We have a Jobot, a no jerks allowed policy. And that's because a lot of time in recruitment, we have salespeople. So salespeople, of course, their income varies and there's different commissions. And so imagine if you're making 3 times as much as someone, but they're doing tech support for you. In what world would you be then condescending to that person? So it is something that we believe it's like employee owned business. We're all working together and having that positive attitude, just gets us to a better place.
Gotcha. And then like for folks that are like actively trying to get a job right now, like I know there's a ton of folks on LinkedIn trying to get jobs. Like I guess where would you start? Obviously I would recommend going to your website, but like where would you start in terms of like you know, if I needed to get a job, say by this month, is there anything that I could do to like increase my chances? Like, would I take my resume, go on ChatGPT, have it reformat the resume, or do I like? I mean, like this is what I would do. I'd probably like take a JD that I'm interested in, my resume, go to like ChatGPT, throw both of those in there, and have it write me like a personalized like resume that's geared towards that JD. Like, do you have any recommendations as to like at least where would I begin?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely valuable. I would take a step even before that and put in ChatGPT, like act as a career coach, and then talk about what you'd want to do and like where you'd want to do it. Because again, there's like a lot of focus of like, I just want a job. I just need a job. And I get like, I grew up from very humble beginnings. I understand like the need to physically get a job to pay your bills. And, there's jobs that are like for quick situations like that, like you're driving Uber or that kind of thing. But like when you're actually looking at as more of your career, it's good to take a step back and say, okay, what would I really want to be in my career? Where do I want to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Now you have that sort of understanding, then you kind of sort of reverse engineer that and say, okay, my goal is in 5 years to work at Disney. So Disney will not look at my resume. So let me look at some small studios, some things. And then now you start to look at who are, let's say, the influencers through LinkedIn in that market and start to read all their posts, like their posts, connect with them. So at the same time, again, if you're looking for I just need a quick buck, like I'm going to go drive Uber, I'm going to go, be Amazon, work in the factory. Like those are things that are like a quick job for money. But I do think that, and I'm surprised schools don't teach more of this, although I think they should, is this idea of long-term career planning and really, again, look at who is going to be your leader, who's going to be mentoring you, because they will probably have the largest impact on your career. So I know it's fancy to say I work for Meta and I work for these big companies, but it's really like who you work for at those companies. And then what were your duties? And a lot of times you work at like a startup and it's more intense, it might be more stressful, but you can learn so much. So then it's understanding of like, what do you really want? Do you want sort of the grit and determination and being part of a startup and being able to build something? But there's a risk to that as well. I did recruit a person early days, Sun Microsystems at Java, and he took a pay cut. He was making like 600K a year, and he wanted to take a job that I had through a startup that was 150,000 a year. So I asked him, like, why would you do it? And he's like, Heidi, I can fall asleep at my desk for 2 weeks and wake up and nobody would know. Like this, like literally, like he's like, it was fun in the very early days, but now it became so big that I'm no longer valued. And he's like, I have a finite amount of time. I love building things. I love being an engineer. And I basically, my financial needs are met as long as 100K or up. So I'd rather take 150 and take a risk. So I do think there is time to like step back and see what are your real goals. Is your goal to like go to your kid's soccer game and it's at 3 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday? Maybe that's a different career path. So it is good to like, once you define your goals, then you can build a career around it.
How do you feel about like continued education? Like, you're working for a company and they're offering to send you back to school. Like, do you think that a lot of folks should be taking that offer?
I think it's similar to what I was talking about being a nurse. I think if it's a very specific thing, I do think there's a lot of for-profit colleges or a lot of certificates and masters and stuff that it's not really a great value. I did have an employee once who went back and got his master's and he came and said like, okay, I want like a $30,000 raise because now I have a master's. So it's like I think a misunderstanding that there's this magical ticket out there that now that creates more money. But I do think that if you want to, if you can go back and get a master's in computer science because you want to be a CTO and that was like the road for you, then I think definitely take up, if the company is willing to pay for it, that's great. But, I've also had a person that was able to go back and get her master's in journalism, and she was a recruiter that worked with me. And so it was an interesting thing of just looking at what jobs require a master in journalism and how much does it pay. And she realized that she would be spending 2 years of her life and $200,000 to get a master's in journalism to essentially take a 50% pay cut. So, I do think it's good to see, like, why are you getting the degree? It's not like a for-profit college that it's like, some nights and weekends and you're putting it in. And there's also some really good, I would say, non-professional, for example, if you wanted to go and be a plumber, there's so many great jobs with that. And I think that has value. So it's really backing up and seeing what you want to do with your life and then deciding versus just grabbing every certificate that you can get.
So what else are you guys doing at Jobot? Can you tell me some insider knowledge on like the cool stuff that you guys are cooking up? It looks like you guys created a cool tool called Jax. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, that's great. So Jobot, the main source is jobot.com. And within that, we have about 15,000 open jobs. And then we have our software, which is called Jax. So it's Jobot Automated Experience. It's also the name of a cute little robot dog. And so with Jax, we do things, for example, if you go to jobot.com and you apply, we have the I2 experience, which is instant interview. So immediately, as soon as you apply, the AI looks at your background and it looks at the job, and then it gives you questions as if it's like a human recruiter asking you questions about your background, how it relates to this job, and it feeds that information to the recruiter. But we look at is how we can use AI and use these tools to help people get jobs. Our focus is the concept of good jobs. So good jobs to us is things like psychological safety. We don't really focus on this concept of a dream job because the reality is a dream job is maybe living out your life in a hammock. It's not necessarily logging in on Zoom every day, although Zooms are exciting. So,
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
no, in my opinion, I don't think anyone dreams of labor.
yeah, exactly. You're like, I love it. Yeah. So I think that that's definitely key for us is like, how can we use AI? And so as an example, there are companies that they kind of, I would say, prey on people who are unemployed, and so like they offer like resume writing services, all of that. So as we continue to grow Jax and Jobot, is the idea of giving all these services to people using AI, but doesn't charge them anything. So we never charge any candidate. And that's just for me, like ethically, I feel like someone is already looking for a job that I'm not in the business to charge them. So there's no, we can upgrade your resume. We can help you get a job. We do all that, but there's no cost to that. But, going back to the AI, so now you're looking at like 10 million users, and now you're looking at 15,000 jobs. How do you match that? And then how do you give our incredible recruiters that we have the ability to like call the top 10 people? It also saves time because you don't want, from a candidate standpoint, if you upload your resume at jobot.com, you want to make sure that Jax is giving you the best possible positions. So you're only having recruiters call you when it's a great fit.
So like if I was part of a company that already had like a recruitment arm, like what's the point of having like your services as opposed to having something in-house?
Yeah. So if you think about it, is like, let's say that you have an in-house team. And so they do great work. And let's say you have 3 people, they're setting up, interviews for different managers within the company, they're writing job descriptions. So we are more a true recruitment arm. Like if you're like, what, we want 3 people out of Amazon Web Service, and like we can literally pull them out and get them to you. And so a huge piece is our AI is the matching of what candidate would be and having access to 10 million users, but then also having this human element of 400 CEO club level recruiters who are incredible salespeople. So they have a real understanding of what makes this company great that they're interviewing with, that they're interviewing for. And so ability to sell the culture, the ability to get the candidate excited. So it's kind of interesting is we have a lot of companies who are actually really good companies, but they don't have ability to get the top talent to actually get on the line and interview with them. So we use our ability to use technology to get to the final group of candidates. And then the human piece of actually really good salespeople that are very ethical. And they're just like, why don't you just give 10 minutes to this company to explain it? So I do feel like using us compared to internal, they would be great if you just have candidates applying to you. You pick the best out of the people who applied to you. For us, is we're actually going to go out and we only charge a fee if we're successful. So it's our goal is to get you better talent than you could find on your own.
So what's your point of view on like what's going to happen in the future? Like in 2025, we have a new administration coming in, and there's some talk about like around like H1B. Like what's your like point of view on like the H1B topic that's about to happen?
So yeah, it's getting a little political. I mean, you could hear what different things that Elon Musk and stuff have said about it. I do feel like it's an interesting point of the level of talent that we have here in the US. I feel like part of it is AI is going to be a huge game changer because there were certain skill sets that we were missing and needed more of in the US. But if you imagine like a very smart person that is now coupled with I do think that that's going to be making them more competitive. I do feel like for the US administration to always have some sort of, it's like almost like an Einstein visa or just ability to get the best and the brightest and really the driven and hardworking. So they don't have to be like a PhD in computer science, but it could be like a top chef. There's just a lot of hardworking immigrants. I mean, I'm not the governor or the president, so probably good. But if it were me, I definitely think that having a constant flow of intelligent, hardworking immigrants is more positive. I don't know. From our standpoint of Jobot, as of 2025, we have definitely increased in hiring. We just did a poll today, and we have over 50% of our companies see it as a growth year in 2025. So that's a positive as well in terms of the amount of jobs that we have open and more importantly, how many companies are actively interviewing. So I do think that's good. I think that, again, having only 4% employment means there's definitely jobs out there. It just takes more effort to get to them.
But are you seeing are you anticipating like in the future that a lot of people are gonna switch their resumes from like whatever it is that they have to be more like AI centric? Because if you go on to like LinkedIn, for instance, like everyone has a tag of like AI expert underneath them for some reason, or like Gen AI or something. Like literally every single resume that I've seen, or at least LinkedIn profile that I've seen so far, has some type of like Gen AI or like AI in it. Are you seeing any type of movements like that on your end?
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that like in 5 years, there will be, unless it's literally like a company that they make boba, that it's like if you are making tacos, maybe you don't use AI, but maybe you do because it helps you figure out which recipes that were more popular with your customers. But I think that AI is going to be so prevalent. Like, so I just was actually up at the LinkedIn headquarters. So I was meeting with the CEO and COO of LinkedIn, and they were talking about that they use AI so much now that things like hashtags and stuff are no longer necessary.
Oh,
And they
interesting. Okay.
yeah, so yeah, it's a good tip because I always use the hashtags. They're like, you don't need them because the AI can just figure it out. And also their videos are taking off incredible. So, having this like natural video is going to be huge because part of it is with AI, that text is going to be like anyone can say, like, act as Heidi and write posts on LinkedIn, act as Simon Sinek, write posts. So it's going to become very sort of questionable, like who's writing this text. And so now it's going to be more interesting, the authentic video that you hopefully can't fake, although you can a bit, but it's a bit more natural. But going back to your question in terms of AI, I do feel like in 5 years, there'll be like these old companies that didn't take AI into consideration and they'll be gone. And then all the companies are using AI, just like all the companies use computers now. It's just so prevalent. I mean, it's in Outlook, it's everything we do will be populated by AI. So that means that I do think that it'll start to be less about AI expert because it'll be like putting on your resume like computer expert, keyboard expert, monitor expert, so there was a time, like a couple of decades ago, where people were like Word expert, Excel expert. You still see it a little bit, but I think it's going to be understood that anyone who even like a 10-year-old kid is going to have to be an AI expert.
Yeah, I know that a lot of like colleges right now, they're and high schools that they're starting up their like AI specific programs now. Like that, my alma mater now has a thing called AI Plus, where like I went to SUNY Albany, and they're mandating that every single department has to have like an AI expert there to like help out, because they're thinking like regardless of what degree that you're gonna get, AI is gonna touch every single like department, and so they're trying to prep up for that. And I think that starting at that level really shows like how fast growing AI is, and how important it is, because even at the educational level, at the formal educational level, they're implementing that. And so I think in the future, I think every single field is going to be impacted by AI, regardless if you support it or not. It's going to be there. And I think
Right.
that you're like everyone needs to upskill to like at least know how to use some of the tools, at least at the bare minimum, maybe like interacting with a chatbot, right? Like
Right.
that's like bare minimum. But if you know a little bit more, it'll make your life a whole lot easier. Like for instance, using a chatbot with like Excel to generate formulas a lot quicker if you're like an analyst or something. At
Yeah.
least that's my 2 cents. Like what's your 2 cents in terms of like, say like next year, like what's going to happen? What should people be looking out for on the horizon in terms of like job seekers and like AI?
Yeah, I think that, in terms of job seekers, it's also like creating your own personal brand. And I do think like using AI to do that. And so, in terms of like, what would they post? What would they do? So it's kind of interesting if we're looking at, for example, a social media manager. Now we're going to look at your whole background and like, do you have the capability to use AI and produce a lot of content? So we're doing, some work with Coca-Cola, for example, now and saying like, okay, here's a Diet Coke ad. Now, if we use the same Diet Coke ad, but we want to localize it for every city in the US, what would that look like? And the AI can do it in like literally minutes. So I think that, embracing the AI instead of saying, I'm so concerned, like, what about all those jobs that just took out? It's literally here. It's like we don't have operators anymore when you dial zero, and we're going to use AI in literally every facet of our lives. So I do think for a job seeker standpoint, instead of having a mindset of like, I'm not sure if I feel comfortable, if I like it, really embrace it. I mean, you can go in ChatGPT and you can use it for free, or you can get like the $20 a month version. But I feel like the people who really embrace it quicker are going to have stronger outcomes.
So like, if I was like a new person on the job market, like what are some helpful tips and tricks that you think I could use? Like if I was just like starting, I guess I'll have like two scenarios, right? Like perhaps getting like fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, like what's your like go-to tip and trick to like land a job? And then the second question is, if you're like early to late career and you want to make a transition, what are some like tips and tricks that you would implement?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, from an earlier point in your career, it's really looking at where you want to be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. So I think that, 20s is an incredible time to take risks. So it's like, let's say that you're like, okay, I'm going to get out. I'm just going to get a job for 17 an hour. Like, figure out where you'd want to live, what you'd want to do, and really take those risks, because it's much harder in your 30s and 40s when you have possibly a mortgage, maybe even kids. Like there's just so much life that gets in the way, maybe a big car payment. I would minimize as much as possible your expenses beyond yourself and just really focus on what kind of life I want to create and build, because maybe you want to do whitewater rafting in Colorado. So it's like really opening your mind. And the great thing is with like a chat GPT is you can say like act as a career coach and give me, the top 20 active jobs in the US, the top 20 AI jobs, and so it's an interesting thing if you think of it as your life is like building a lifestyle for yourself and creating this future for yourself. And then AI is just a tool. It's just like a calculator that you're going to use to do that. So I do think that for young people, I know it's a scary time. And I know a lot of times and it just my own daughters are in their 20s and their friends are of course around that same age, so life is very set for you. You know, you go to your junior high, your high school, if you get certain amount of grades you go to college, but after college it's literally like the world is a tough place. And it was kind of funny as I went to lunch with my daughter's friends yesterday, and I was saying, oh wow, you're all adults now, because they're all around 25. And one of them said, yeah, it's rough out here. You know, and so they were saying like they kind of liked it, they didn't realize how it was so nice that you just had a set amount of goals and you focus on that. So I do think it's like, again, looking at your life and figuring out where you'd want to leave, where you'd want to live, where you'd want to be, and doing all that together. And then again, you could use AI. And I think the experience is very similar from that. And then when you're older and you want to try something new or do something new, a huge piece of it is just confidence, because companies want someone that come in and they're positive and they want to get it done. They don't want either from someone who's right out of college or someone who's 50 making a life change, is someone who is questioning themselves, insecure, and takes so much training and so much effort that it would be less effort not to hire them. So it's, again, if you put the burden on yourself to learn yourself, to go on LinkedIn, to see what people who are doing the job that you want to do, what they're doing, and the more that you can have self-confidence and the more that you can become off as even like an expert, or even like someone who knows enough that it's worth for them to come to your company, it makes a huge difference.
And do you have any like final thoughts about like, like the job market, AI, anything, any last things that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I would say that, again, it's interesting that the more people embrace AI and the more that they look at their job as literally like stepping stones of their life and figuring out what life they want to build for themselves. And inherently, maybe that means also their family or their favorite dog. What does that life mean to you? And then back that up to what that career is. I do think like as a culture, we consume a job as it relates to money versus a job as it relates to like the life that you want.
So if I was like a company that had like recruitment arm, or if I'm like a person looking for a job, like, and I wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
So you go to jobot.com. Woo, ah. So it's just a Jobbot, just jobot.com. And so we have about 15,000 jobs. We have more perm jobs than any single source in the country. By perm, it's like direct hire. We also have the ability to become a Jobot consultant. So we have over 1,000 consultants that are deployed all the way throughout the US remotely into different companies. So it's exciting. But for us, it's, again, we focus on getting people really good jobs that allow them to live a good life.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. And until next time, stay curious.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate you.